Hi guys, Korpen here. This is me playing the M5A1 sewer tank, the third of its kind. I wanted to play the sewer since it saw service in the Pacific. And lately, the Pacific has been showing up in my life, both the HBO series, The Pacific, as well as me making plans for eventually going back to the Philippines, and that made me think about that I've already been to the Philippines once, since my father's wife comes from the Philippines, and we've been there in 1997, and that made me think about a story, and it has to do with me almost getting killed in the Philippines. It's not really a scary story, but it could have gone horribly wrong. Fortunately, it didn't. In fact, me and my father could have gotten kidnapped in the Philippines. The Philippines is divided. Down in the south, you have a population that is mainly Muslim, and the rest of the nation is mainly Christian or Catholic. The Muslims want a country for their own, and down in the south there's a big island that's called Mindanao, and around the coast you have Catholic people and Catholic settlements, but in the mainland, away from the coast, most people are Muslim, and they have a sort of a rebel army. I don't know about it now, but when we were there, the rebels and the Filipino army was at war with each other, basically. Or the rebels had declared war against the state until they could get the country of their own. And what they tend to do, or what they did tend to do at that time, was that they often kidnap people to have some sort of leverage against the state to make demands. And when we were there, the nation was in a bit of turmoil, you know. There had been a lot of kidnappings of tourists and other people. That's scary, alright. But what's even more scary is that the Filipino police and the Filipino army didn't really care all that much about collateral damage. What they cared about was nailing the bad guys, the rebels. So being a hostage is a very good setup for you to get hurt, you know, because the Filipino army tend to be very hard against the Muslim rebels. If they find out that there are rebels in an area, they go in hard and they hit most buildings and stuff. They use Air Force and they use attack choppers and stuff. So being kidnapped isn't a very good idea, since the kidnappers tend to put you in sheds or houses near where they have their base. So why were we in a sort of a situation where we could potentially get kidnapped? Well, most tourists doesn't go to the southern parts of the Philippines. You know, it's a very dangerous area of the country. So most tourist boards in Western countries, they tend to give you the advice that you should not go there. But since my father's wife comes from the Mindanao island, we were supposed to go down and visit her family in the village of Manga, which is nothing more than just a sort of a crossroads in the middle of the jungle with something like 50 houses or something like that. And so we went there to visit her relatives. I think it is her aunt's husband, who is the mayor of the village. She has a cousin that is a police officer in the village, and then another cousin who's a sergeant in the army nearby in a town called Cagayan de Oro. And we went there, and they don't really get white people to their village all that often. So when we showed up, it was a big celebration because something different was happening from the everyday shores, you know. So they had a big barbecue. They barbecued a whole pig for everyone in the village to share. and stuff. So that was kind of cool. And there was some pretty fancy dinners there the first week we were in the village. And I knew nothing about the rebel situation in the south. So I was just enjoying it, you know. I was 16 years old and I was having a good time there in the jungle. I was sort of exploring the area around the village and stuff. And we went on field trips and we had, good fun, you know. Then all of a sudden, the mayor of the town, who had invited us to his house to stay there, and when we were in the village, he came home from work one day and he said, okay, there's a situation. Maybe you shouldn't go outside anymore during your stay in this village. Because apparently there's a rumor going around town that the Moros guerrilla, or the rebels, are planning to kidnap you. And when you hear stuff like that, it sends chills down your spine, you know, because those guys are pretty rugged warriors with, you know, Kalashnikovs, they have M16s, they have machine guns, decked out jeeps with weapons and stuff. So what they do is that they basically just show up, they kidnap you and they take you out into the jungle, and then they press the government for money, blackmail the government. And the problem is that they tend to do this a lot. So the government doesn't give much attention to people who get kidnapped. So apparently there were Moros guerrilla in the area and they were looking for us. People had seen them with their cars. So we had to stay indoors, and we were leaving the village 2 days later. So we would go to the airport and we would take a plane and fly north to the more Catholic regions of the country, to a big town called Cebu. And I remember staying indoors for 2 days straight, just laying on my bed, reading books and being absolutely terrified that jeeps would park in front of the house and that people with scars around the faces would show up with weapons and just kidnap us and drag us out into the jungle. Fortunately, that did not happen. We got the army escort. They showed up with 2 jeeps filled with army personnel, as well as my father's wife's cousin, the sergeant, who had sort of rallied his men. So they escorted us to the airfield, and then we took the plane out from Mindanao. That was kind of crazy, you know. That could have been a really nasty situation had we gotten kidnapped and dragged out into the jungle. Because, you know, the Filipino army, they're pretty rough on the rebels. They don't want them around at all. So, wow, that was a close call. Fortunately, they did not find us. So, but they were searching for us, alright. But they never found us. So, probably they did not have any intel on where we lived or with whom. But I remember the sheriff, as well as the mayor, saying that if someone shows up, it's okay. We got weapons, so we'll defend you. We'll fight if they show up. And there are people in the village who doesn't like the Moros, so they'll also show up. We have people alerted should we see any funky looking jeeps or vehicles moving through the village. But, you know, I've never been in a firefight my whole life, so I wasn't looking forward to that prospect. Potentially being in a real firefight. But we made it out of there. So that was a big relief. You know, the rest of the vacation, the rest of the 3 weeks that we had planned as a vacation was a big relief, you know. And you go away from it just thinking, okay, that was close, but I'm alive now. So you sort of just forget it, you know, you move on with life. I've been in other situations where my life was threatened. In a way, you never forget, but also you just forget those things. It's a terrible thing when it happens, but once it's over and you've made it out alive, you sort of just move on. And yeah, let me know if you want to hear more stories. I've been around the world and I've experienced a few crazy things. This was one of the most crazy things I've experienced. I've been to Israel also. We arrived in Israel one day before the last Intifada started, so that was fun. We came to Israel and we went to bed. We found a place where we were supposed to stay. We went to bed. When we woke up the next day, the country was in civil war, more or less. And the whole Palestine population of Israel had revolted. That was crazy. Man, oh man. So, anyway, that's enough of story time with me, Korpen. This rolling in the background, by the way, is probably the best game I've ever had in the M5A1 Stuart. Don't really play this tank all that much, but I kinda like it. It's a bit like the M22 Locust, but with a higher profile. It's a fast tank, it's nimble, it's small, it's easy to conceal. As you saw there during the video, I just parked in the shade. The enemy tankers couldn't spot me because I was too small of a target to be spotted, and I was on the wrong side of them, so they weren't watching my way. That's cool with tanks like these. You can really move around the battlefield and just totally flank the whole main battle line of the enemy's tanks. And yeah, I took full advantage out of that during this mission. Where I scored 6 kills, and if I'm not completely mistaken, I think I got 3 assists as well. The main goal for this video was to not only share my story about how I was almost kidnapped in the Philippines. The main goal was to have a full lineup of Pacific tanks and planes, and that I would play a combined arms game where I used most of the tags. But unfortunately that was not to be the case, since I did so well in the M5A1. And I tend to do well when I play combined arms. It's not often that I have to use a lot of vehicles. Most times I get killed once or twice, and then we lose the game or we win. So yeah, that was it for me today. Hope you liked the story, and I hope to see you guys around in the next video. Thank you for watching. Have a great evening.